I want every gun we have to fire on that man. Do it.
Think you got him?
Now, if we're ready to get moving, we can finish this.
Sir?
What's happening, guys? Supernova here, back with another video, and this is going to be my review of Starfield, having now beat the game and roughly about 3 hours into what's essentially New Game Plus. And I'm not going to bury the lead here on you guys. Starfield's a great game. I've had a lot of fun with it, and I'm still having a lot of fun with it. But it is not Game of the Year. It is not Game of the Generation. It is not a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. It is none of that shit. Likewise, it is not a 4 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 or some piece of trash. It's none of that shit either, okay? For me, it's a solid 8 out of 10. If someone wanted to try to make the case for being a 9, I could see them trying to make that case. I don't know that I'd necessarily agree with them, but if someone tried to make the case, I'd say, you know, maybe you could make that case. Anyone trying to make the case for this game being a 6 or below, they're out of their fucking minds. There's no way in hell. For me, this game, anywhere between a 7 and an 8 out of 10, I think, is a fair score for this game. Where it's sitting in the Metacritic, I think is fair. People that are crying foul because it's an 86 on Metacritic, listen, an 86, that's a fucking B+, alright? A B+ is nothing to be upset about. It's not a bad grade. Now, Starfield definitely had an opportunity to score higher. Starfield could have easily been a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 masterpiece, game of the generation type game. But unfortunately for it, there were several decisions made or things that the game does that really do, for me at least, hold it back from being that type of game. And let me start off by saying that Starfield is through and through a Bethesda game. It is a Bethesda-ass Bethesda game. If you're familiar with the Elder Scrolls, Oblivion, and Skyrim, or any of the Fallout games, then you're familiar with this game. It is Bethesda through and through. Is it the greatest Bethesda game ever made? No. No, it's not. You'll hear a lot of people saying that, but no, it's not. For me, peak Bethesda was Skyrim. For some other people, it's going to be either Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas, but for me, peak Bethesda was Skyrim. Now, this game does do some things differently, and some of those things are actually quite good and honestly better than they've done in any of their previous Bethesda games. Unfortunately, though, you also get some changes that, in my opinion, are quite worse than they have been in previous Bethesda games, and honestly, for me, were quite annoying. Like, some of the changes annoyed the shit out of me. I don't understand why they chose the route they chose with some things. But it is what it is. This is the game Bethesda has given us, and I'll explain those things as we get a little further into the video. Now, I want to start off by discussing something you may have been hearing people say, and that is that the beginning of the game is very, very slow, very, very boring, hard to get into. Unfortunately, I'd have to agree with those statements, right? Now, while I personally didn't find it difficult to get through, that's not going to be the case for everybody, right? I could definitely see a scenario where someone's trying to play this game and just they can't get through it. It's just too slow, too unengaging, and after about 8 or 9 hours, they're like, you know, that's it, fuck this, I'm out. And unfortunately, that is very much this game. Bethesda games usually start out slow. This Bethesda game starts out incredibly slow, comparatively, right? Another thing you're probably hearing a lot of people say is that the game gets good or gets better after about 15 hours. Again, this is something that I would agree with. Unfortunately, I don't think you should have to, right? Like, you'll hear this bullshit narrative spun by people of, no, don't give up, you don't understand, you just need to invest 15 hours into this game and then you'll see it gets better. You know, you need to, you have to. I'm sorry, you shouldn't need to or have to do a fucking thing. It is the job of the developer to create a game that grabs your attention and is fun to play from the very, very start. You should need to or have to do anything to make the game fun. It should be fun from the second you start. I keep giving people this analogy. Imagine this game was a 20-episode Netflix series, each episode's an hour, and someone invested 10 hours of their life to watch 10 episodes, and they just don't like the show. They find it boring, they find it dull, they don't like the plot, they don't like the characters, and they say, you know what, I watched 10 episodes, fuck it, I'm out. I've seen enough, I'm out. And then I come to them and I say, no, you don't understand. You need to watch past episode 18. After episode 18, then you'll see this show is a great show. I can't expect that person to give a fuck, right? Like, that person's already invested 10 hours of their life into the show. They don't like it. Can't expect them to then invest another 8 hours of their life to watch a show that they already know they don't like, in the hopes that maybe they too will like the show after episode 18, because they don't know if they will. People who play this game for 10 or 12 hours and just aren't feeling it may not be willing to invest another 3 hours in the hopes that maybe they will after that, right? We can't expect them to do that. And they shouldn't have to. They shouldn't need to. The game should be good, engaging, and fun right off the bat. Now, having said that, yes, after the 15 or so hours, the game does get better. The game does get much more fun. Now, one of the areas in which this game really does excel, not only in over its previous games, but over pretty much any game, is its side quests. Because this being a Bethesda RPG, on top of the main quest and the main storyline, there are also a multitude, a plethora of side quests and side activities that you can do or get into. Different people you can go help, different factions you can join, all kinds of shit, right? And this, for me, has some of the best side quests I've ever played in a video game, at least that I can think of. Now, there are some that are duds, you know, your run-of-the-mill standard fetch quests, your, oh, go grab me these things, or, for example, I just did one where someone was siphoning power, so the quest was essentially go from circuit breaker to circuit breaker until we find out who's siphoning the power. It was also pretty much a one-and-done side quest, right? Like, I did the side quest, I helped that person, boom, that side quest is done, and I'm done dealing with that person. I'll probably never talk to that person again, right? A one-and-done side quest, pretty standard, run-of-the-mill type side quest you would expect in a video game. Then there are ones that are way more engaging and way more involved. For example, one town deputized me, and then I essentially became a space bounty hunter, going all around the fucking galaxy collecting these bounties. Another one that I was like, whoa, I did not see this happening, was I went to a kiosk in a city and applied for a job, because that's the type of shit you do in an RPG. I applied for a job and got the job and went down this fucking rabbit hole of this corporation using me to commit acts of corporate espionage, to break into offices and plant evidence, or to hack into systems and steal plans for prototype devices. Shit like that, right? And just spent hours of my life committing these acts of corporate espionage and working my way up the corporate ladder and finding moles in our corporations and shit like that. And none of it had to do with the main story or the main quest. It was entirely optional. You could literally go through this entire game and beat it without ever having stopped at that kiosk to apply for that job. It's entirely optional side quest, side content. And honestly, in any other game, these missions are worthy of being main quest missions, right? They're not fetch quests. They're not go grab me fucking 6 apples or any of that dumb shit. They are easily worthy of being main quest missions, and they're entirely optional side quest missions. So I do really have to give this game props in terms of its side quests. Again, they're not all bangers, they're not all amazing. Some of them are your random run-of-the-mill fetch quests, but then some of them are things like this, where it's like, wow, I just went through this whole additional story that had nothing to do with what I was doing. I just spent 4 hours, 5 hours doing this whole other thing, living out a life completely separate from what I'm supposed to be doing. And there's things like that that I love about RPGs, right? So props to this game when it comes to its side quests. Now, when it comes to the main story, the main campaign, I honestly didn't find it to be that good, right? I've heard people talk about how amazing the main story is. I honestly don't think the story is that great in this game. I will say the story did go someplace I totally was not expecting, totally didn't think it ever would go. And I want to give it bonus points for doing something unexpected, something that I didn't see coming. But at the same time, I can't give it bonus points because honestly, the thing it did is something that's just being done all the time and everything right now. So almost bonus points for doing something different than I was expecting, but take those points back for it being not quite original. Another miss in this game for me is the characters. I'm going to be honest, you're not going to give a fuck about any of the characters in this game. And I mean like the main characters, right? Like your main companions. You're not going to give a fuck about any of these characters. Even the ones that you have as part of your crew on your ship, you're not going to give a fuck about. They're not interesting. You don't really ever spend any time with them or talk to them. You just won't care. The only time you're ever going to care about a character is if you have them going with you on your quests. And that's entirely optional, right? They don't have to go with you. You can literally go do all the quests completely on your own. And if you do that, you will give a fuck about 0 characters. If you have one go with you on your quest, that one you probably will start to care about because they're going with you doing things, and from time to time they will stop you to ask questions or have dialogue with you. So you will kind of care about those characters. Other than that, you just won't fucking care. Now, a place this game is really good is when it comes to the combat. This game has a very fun combat, really good gunplay. I've heard people saying it's the best gunplay in any Bethesda game. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I'd have to go back and play Fallout 4 to see if it really feels all that different. To me, it just kind of felt like the gunplay in Fallout 4. But, just for the sheer fact that Fallout is a post-apocalyptic game, and those weapons are like hobbled together with shovels and screwdrivers and look like something that Al-Qaeda would put together in a fucking cave. And this game has actual weapons, fucking military-grade weapons, like assault rifles and SMGs and pistols and shotguns that look like actual weapons, and not something some terrorist hobbled together in a cave somewhere with nothing but fucking spit, sand, and a prayer to Allah. The game has a lot of cool weapons, even a lot of cool melee weapons, and they all feel great to use. They also sound great. The weapons, when you're firing them, they sound great. And the guns themselves and the selection of guns, easily one of the highlights of the game. And then the combat itself, again, another highlight of the game. Now, here's another area where I really take issue with the game. And it's one of those changes I was talking about earlier that Bethesda made that I feel makes the game worse. And it's the way that they handle skills. I hate the way that this game handles skills because it essentially grinds your progression to a halt. And this, for me, is easily the grindiest of Bethesda games when it comes to the skills. Now, does it affect your ability to play the game? No. Do you need all these skills to play and beat the game? No. But you want these skills. You want to get abilities. You want to do all these things. And the way this game handles it, I just don't like. I don't agree with. And I will explain why right now, to help you understand the difference and why it's such a big deal. I'm going to explain the skills and gaining experience in skills in this game to doing it in, let's say, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Now, in Skyrim, whenever you do something, you gain experience. Doesn't matter what it is. If you do it, you gain experience. So let's say, hypothetical, I have a bow, I have some arrows, and I have some lockpicks. And I just started the game, have no skill points, have no nothing. And I go into a cave. Once I'm in there, I crouch and sneak my way through the whole cave, killing enemies with my bow while I'm in there and picking locks. And then I clear the cave and I leave. While I was in there, because I was crouched, I was gaining experience towards stealth. Because I was using my bow to kill people, I was gaining experience in archery. And because I was picking locks, I was gaining experience in lockpicking. In order to gain experience in those areas, nothing was required of me other than doing those things. I love this method of leveling up abilities because you just play the game, and however you're playing it, you're going to gain experience for the things you are doing, right? Whatever your play style is, you're going to gain experience in those things. Now, let's move over to Starfield. And let's say I have a gun with some bullets, and I have digipicks, which is essentially this game's version of lockpicks. And let's say I go into a facility, and I crouch and sneak my way through the entire facility, killing people with my guns. Notice I didn't say anything about picking locks, and I'll explain why in a second. So let's say I've now cleared that area. I have gained no experience for stealth, I have gained no experience towards my guns, and I have gained no experience towards lockpicking. Why? Because in order to even start gaining experience in stealth, you have to first put a skill point into it. In order to start gaining experience towards guns, you have to first put a skill point into ballistics. To even start gaining experience in lockpicking, and to even be able to pick a lock, you have to first put a skill point into security. Yes, I said that correctly. If you don't have a skill point in security, even if you have digipicks on you, you cannot pick locks. So on top of not being able to get any XP for picking locks, you can't pick them, period, unless you have a point in security. This means by comparison, nothing you do gains XP until you put points in it. Whereas in Skyrim, you just gained XP all the time, just by doing. Nothing stopped you from gaining XP. Nothing stopped you from leveling abilities up. Just by doing them, you leveled up the ability. This was extremely confusing to me because I didn't understand why I couldn't pick locks when I had digipicks. I also didn't understand why I wasn't able to use the boosters on my backpack when I found a new backpack that had boosters on it. Why? Because I didn't have a fucking skill point into the fucking boosters. So even though I have a backpack that has thrusters on it, I can't use them until I put a skill point in it. Like, this shit just doesn't make any sense to me. And it gets worse than that. Now, for this part, I'm just going to stick with lockpicking and how lockpicking works, okay? Now, this is the lockpicking tree in Skyrim. Level 100 is the max. So once you've gotten to level 100 in lockpicking, you've maxed out that ability. Now, notice the nodes along the tree. These nodes are for things like making it easier to pick locks or having lockpicks that don't break, but they are entirely optional, and they open up when you get to a certain level. For example, one node may open up when you get to level 20, another node may open up when you get to level 40 in lockpicking, another node may open up when you get to level 60, and these are the things that you can put your skill points into, but you don't have to. And I cannot put any skill points into lockpicking at all. It doesn't stop me from being able to get my lockpicking up to 100%, because even if I don't put any points into the lockpicking tree, I'm still gaining experience for every lock I tried to pick. Whether I pick the lock successfully or whether my lockpick breaks, it doesn't matter. I'm gaining XP. Whether I put my skill points into the lockpicking tree or not, it doesn't matter. I'm constantly gaining XP, and I can get to level 100, maxing out my lockpicking without putting a single point into this tree. Nothing stops me from gaining experience in lockpicking. Nothing. As long as I'm picking locks, I'm constantly gaining XP, constantly leveling up. Again, comparatively, the way they do it in Starfield, it fucking sucks, okay? Because look at this image. Do you see where it says rank 1? That's where it opens up when you put your first skill point. And it says you can attempt to hack advanced locks. Advanced locks are the easiest locks in the game. So in order for rank 1 to even open up, you have to put your skill point into it, like I explained before. So if you don't put a skill point into security, you're not picking any fucking locks. Now, if you notice in the lower left-hand corner, it says challenge progress. Pick 5 locks. Now, in order for rank 2 to become unlocked for me to put a skill point into, I have to pick 5 locks. No problem. You pick 5 locks, rank 2 opens up, and then now you can put a skill point into rank 2, which allows you to hack harder difficulty locks. But let's say I don't put that skill point in rank 2, because I'm trying to put skill points into other things. And let's say I hack another 100 locks. Guess what? I didn't gain experience for a single one. They don't count. They only count if you have a current challenge that's in progress. If that challenge is completed, they don't count towards anything. So So I picked the 5 locks, and rank 2 unlocks for me to put a skill point into, but unless I put that skill point into 2, where it gives me the new challenge with the new number of locks to pick, any lock I pick after that does nothing for gaining experience towards lock picking. And I know some of you out there are probably like, well, yeah, why didn't you just throw the skill point in rank 2? Like, what are you bitching about? Well, the problem is those skill points, what if I want to level up my guns? What if I want to level up how much shit I can carry? What if I want to level how far I can sprint before I'm out of breath? What if I want to level up how much it costs me to buy shit and how much money I get from selling shit? What if I want to level up any of those things? If I want to level up any of those things, I've got to put the skill point in those. Like, that's the problem with this game, is we're in Skyrim. Just by doing, you gain experience. This game locks experience behind where you put skill points. And then not only that, once you put a skill point in a certain area, after a certain amount of time, your progression there is going to get halted again unless you put another skill point into it. So trying to get all these abilities and all these skills, it's nothing but grinding and grinding. And I can tell you, my first playthrough in Skyrim, by the time I had completed the game, how far I had made it with my skills and how many skills I had leveled up. I had skills leveled up all over the board. Some maxed out, some not, but some still leveled up. Opening nodes I could then put skill points into. Having beaten Starfield and now a New Game Plus, I've only maxed out like 3 abilities. And then the rest of my skill points are kind of just spread all over the place. Because if I didn't put my skill points in the first tier for things, I wasn't getting experience in anything. Like if I didn't put the skill point in ballistics, I wasn't going to get any experience towards my guns. If I didn't put a skill point into weightlifting, I wasn't going to get any experience towards how much shit I can carry. And if I didn't put my skill point into a bunch of these other different categories, I'd essentially be wasting hours of gameplay not leveling anything up. So you got 2 choices. You got 2 choices to make. Either you put a skill point into only one thing and only level up that one thing with nothing else getting leveled up, with nothing else gaining XP, or you spread your skill points out so you can start at least gaining XP in all these different areas. And then again, even after you do that, the XP is going to get halted for all of those things once you've completed the first challenge for those things and unlocked the rank 2 for those different categories. XP is going to get halted again all over the board. And then you're going to once again have to spread your skill points out evenly because you're not gaining any XP for those things. The way they do it is stupid. It's constantly halting the progression of gaining XP towards your skills. And then there are certain things that are locked in rows of categories. For example, you can research mods for your weapons, different scopes and suppressors and things like that. But some of those scopes and suppressors and grips and different types of ammunition you only unlock if you have level 2 weapon engineering. Well, weapon 2 level engineering is in the second row of the science category. And level 2 doesn't open up until you first have spent 4 points in the top row of science. And I can tell you right now, I didn't give a fuck about any of the things in the first row of science. But if I wanted to get weapon engineering 2 and be able to put better gear on my weapons, I had to dedicate 4 skill points into the science tree, at least for the first row, to unlock weapon engineering 2. What does that mean? That means 4 less skill points for everything else. Just the way it's done halts progression. It really does. And I dislike it. Is it a deal breaker? No. But it's absolutely a step backwards, in my opinion, from the way it was done in previous games. One place that this game does make a change that I find is extremely positive is the way that it handles being encumbered. Because this being a Bethesda RPG, you can pick up almost every item that you see, and every item that you see has a value, meaning it can be sold for money. And what you'll find is, at least for me, I fucking grab everything I can. Anything of value, I grab. I don't care what it is. If it has some decent value to it, I'm picking it up because I know I can sell it to a vendor and get credits for it and then buy better guns and stuff, right? So you grab everything you can. And this game incentivizes grabbing shit, right? It's got entire systems dedicated to grabbing shit, picking shit up. The problem is your character has a weight capacity. And when you're encumbered, it affects mobility. And in previous games, that meant that you couldn't jump, it meant you couldn't sprint, it also meant you could barely walk. You moved at a snail's pace. And when that happened, you had basically 2 options. move at a snail's pace back to your home base or back to a place where you could sell these items or offload some items or drop items. I can't speak for everybody, but I know for myself, I ain't dropping shit, right? Like, I'll have people watching me play and they're like, why don't you just drop that fucking thing you picked up? Like, that thing that's worth 200 credits, you want me to drop that? No, fuck that. I ain't dropping nothing. Like, what about that apple? Just drop that apple. It's only worth 5 credits. I'm like, no, fuck that. I ain't dropping shit. I want that 5 credits. It's going to take me a little longer to get back to the merchant, but I'm not dropping anything. So you end up getting encumbered all the time and, not wanting to drop things, especially if the only things in your inventory are high-value items, right? Pieces of armor, weapons. Those are all the heaviest things in your inventory. And the only way you're going to be unencumbered is to drop a really heavy piece of armor, or a heavy, in this case, spacesuit, or a backpack, or a gun. But those are all worth a lot of money. You're not going to want to drop anything. And in a game that incentivizes you to grab everything, you're going to get encumbered all the time. And like I said, in previous games, it brought you to a snail's pace. In this game, fortunately, instead of preventing you from being able to jump and forcing you to move at a snail's pace, all it does is it makes it so you run out of sprint faster. That's it. So like as you're sprinting, you can see your oxygen level being consumed. And if you're encumbered, your oxygen level just gets consumed faster. That's it. But you can still walk at a regular speed, and you can even still sprint. It's just your sprint doesn't last as long. When I tell you that this fucking change is a godsend, I mean, it's a fucking godsend. What a wonderful, wonderful change to the normal Bethesda formula. This is one of those things that definitely makes the game better. Because the previous method of not being able to move at all, fucking what a bummer that shit was. So thank you, Bethesda, for deciding to make that change. Another thing you probably heard about this game is that it's the least buggy Bethesda game ever made. And for anybody that knows Bethesda games, their nickname is Bugthesda, and they earned that fucking name by the amount of bugs that their games have. Well, I have to say that credit where credit is due, this is indeed, at least for me, the least buggy Bethesda game I have ever played. I've experienced maybe 4 bugs in my entire 40 plus hours of playing. I only experienced maybe 1 crash. All in all, easily my best experience in terms of bugs and crashing. When it comes to performance, I'm on the Xbox Series X. It ran fine for me. It's locked at 30, and for the most part, I think it sits at 30. There are times where it dipped below 30. You can clearly tell that it's struggling with the frames, but they were mostly just when I was walking through cities or settlements. When I was like out fighting and searching buildings and shit, I didn't really experience a whole lot of frames dropping. I'm not saying that it didn't occur during those times. Just, I only really noticed it when I was walking through cities and settlements. So all in all, performance, at least on the Xbox Series X, was fine. An area that's a letdown for me, though, is the visuals. I think visually this game is just meh, especially on console, right? Like, I can't speak to what it looks like on PC, but I can tell you that on the Xbox Series X, it looks like a last-gen game. Nothing about it looks or feels next-gen, especially when it comes to the character models. The character models are fucking ugly. They're all ugly. They look weird. Their skin looks like it's made out of plastic. They just don't look real. Also, the animations and facial animations for the characters, some are decent. The facial animations, like some I'm looking at, I'm like, okay, that's not too bad. And others are horrendously bad. And all in all, the characters, when you're talking to them, they don't feel like real people. I made this comparison on Twitter that when you talk to NPCs in this game, I feel like I'm talking to the fucking Johnny Cab from Total Recall. It's just that they feel more like cyborgs or robots than they feel like people. Especially after having played games like Horizon Forbidden West, where that's some of the best animations I've ever seen for NPCs. The NPCs here just feel dead and lifeless by comparison. And yes, I know there are just so many NPCs in this game that there was no way they were going to have the time and or money to do motion capture or performance capture for everybody, so they're just hand animated the old school way versus Horizon Forbidden West, where it's all performance capture. So obviously the animation there is going to be better. I understand why it looks like shit in Starfield, but it doesn't change the fact that it looks like shit, right? And it's these things that help make it feel like an old game, right? If it had the animations that Horizon Forbidden West had for all its NPCs, it would help lend itself to making it feel like at least a current generation game, because that's the type of performance we're getting in current generation games. Because it doesn't have that, it still feels like I'm playing a game from the last generation. And then graphically, obviously, also feels like a game from the last generation. Another positive for the game is, on top of all the side quests, there are a ton of additional things to do. For example, on top of buying and selling ships, you can also upgrade ships. And I mean upgrade individual parts of your ships, different weapon systems on these ships, your warp engines, your shields. You can also build any ship you can think of. Granted, you're limited by the different pieces that the game has, but any ship your imagination can come up with the puzzle pieces they give you, you can build that ship. You can also build your own outposts, and again, whatever outpost your mind can imagine with the pieces that this game has, you can build it. You can just get lost in the different game mechanics, right? I've literally seen videos where people have spent hours of their life dedicated to making farms for mining materials so that they have the materials and resources they need for other things. Like, this dude had literally, it looked like he had built fucking 20-story condominiums on his planet, and what they were giant containers to house all the materials he was mining, and he had like what looked like oil derricks just sitting there mining resources out of the planet. Like, there's all kinds of crazy shit you can do. And then you have things like your armor bench, where you can craft and modify armor, your weapons bench, where you can craft and modify weapons. Just like in games like Zelda, you can make meals that you can eat to heal yourself or give yourself certain buffs. Like, you can literally, if you want to go down those rabbit holes, spend days just seeing how far the rabbit hole goes, just spending hours and hours of your life dedicated to things that are not the main quest, that aren't even side quests. It's just the other shit that you can do in the game. And overall, that's a big positive for this game, because there is a lot of things for you to do. Do you have to do them? No. I personally didn't touch either the ship builder or the outpost builder in my first playthrough. I may in my second, but I didn't touch them at all in my first playthrough because I didn't care about it. So it's there if you want it. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. But there is a bunch of additional things you can do in this game. And overall, that's a net positive for Starfield, if you ask me. Now, the next area is the biggest issue I have with the game, and the thing that for me is really what pulls it down from being a game of the generation 10 out of 10 type game. And that is the lack of sense of exploration and adventure that I got from previous Bethesda games. For example, in Fallout 4, the second you leave your vault, Vault 111, you're just opened up into the entire world where Fallout 4 takes place. The entire map is accessible, and the only time you're going to hit load screens is if you are loading into or out of certain structures, right? Like, there are a lot of buildings that are just freestanding in the open world that you can go and explore without a single loading screen. Buildings you can go into, stores you can go into, where you don't load anything. But then there's going to be certain structures where, as you enter it, there's going to be a small loading screen while it loads the entire interior of that structure. This game is very different. Because of the nature of being an interplanetary game, it doesn't have one map. It has 1,000 maps, right? Because there are 1,000 planets, and you are constantly bouncing from place to place. So the game has you go to this planet, then to this planet, then to this planet. It's not one giant cohesive world where you're just put right into the center of it and allowed to go and explore and just find shit, right? It's not like that.
Like, I love exploration in a Bethesda RPG, like, you know, getting out of the vault in Fallout and being like, I might go here. And you just wander off in a direction and you find some super cool side quest or some outpost that's just doing like crazy stuff, or some settlement that's just like nothing you could ever have imagined. I love that so much in Elder Scrolls and in Fallout. Just wandering and seeing what you'll find. I have not found any of that in Starfield. There is no wander and see what you'll find in terms of like actual planetary exploration. I've gone to several outposts on multiple planets because, you know, you'll see like this used to be a settlement and then you go there. Every single time I have not yet found a single exception. I'm sure they exist as I keep playing the game, but I've not found any, which like makes it off-putting to even do. When, you know, you see like there's a main city and then there's a separate place you can land and another place you can land. They are always just like a couple of buildings, usually some dead scientists and some space pirates who immediately want to shoot me. You can maybe find some weapons and stuff there, but I've not found any of the like stumble across an outpost that has an interesting story thing that is so awesome in Fallout.
And honestly, the bouncing from planet to planet to planet wouldn't even be an issue really for me if on those planets, every planet had a map that was like Fallout or Elder Scrolls, right? Every planet is just filled to the brim with things to do. Every planet has all kinds of structures and buildings and caves. And once you land on a planet, you can go out any direction and you're just gonna find shit, right? You're gonna have that sense of adventure and exploration on every planet that you got in Fallout or Elder Scrolls. If that was the case, I wouldn't have an issue hopping from planet to planet, because that meant that every planet I went to was a new opportunity for adventure and exploration. Hell, that's not a bad thing. That would never be a bad thing. Unfortunately for this game, and this was something that I was concerned about before the game even came out, this game has 1,000 planets. And my concerns before the game came out was, fuck dude, 1,000 planets, there's no way that these planets are going to be filled with life and things to do and fun things to find and explore. It's too many fucking planets, and there's no way it's going to happen. And unfortunately, my concerns were true. That there are 1,000 planets, yes, but they're essentially 1,000 planets empty and devoid of life with nothing to do. It really is unfortunate, you know, and, you know, you'll have missions and side quests that'll send you to planets where there might be an abandoned research facility or an abandoned science lab or a bandit camp or some shit like that, right? But outside that one facility, there's pretty much nothing else. Like, you can fucking look around in every direction and there just is nothing there. There's nothing. It's just an empty fucking planet. So that feeling of adventure and exploration that I got in those other Bethesda games, which is one of the things that I loved about Bethesda games, was me just exploring and just finding shit and not knowing what I'm going to find around every corner. It's one of the things that made Elden Ring so much fun, was just not knowing what you're going to find and just exploring and finding things and searching for things. This game lacks almost all of that because you have this 1,000 worlds that have nothing on them. You also have to think about they can only create so many different creatures and create so much different plant life. And then those creatures and that plant life has to get spread out across 1,000 planets. So what happens is, on top of having 1,000 planets that have nothing to do on them, you also have 1,000 planets that have maybe 3 animals and 3 different plants on them, a couple different rock types, and that's it. And something you're going to hear all the time when you bring up these criticisms from defenders of this game is that, well, yeah, but that's not realistic to have life on every planet. Like, what, you want life on every single planet? And my answer is, yeah, it's a fucking video game. Why do I want to go to a planet that has nothing on it? And if someone hits you with that bullshit, all you have to do is say this to instantly shatter that bullshit fucking argument. So let me ask you a question. You mean to tell me that if you landed on a planet and got out of your ship and found that it was full of life and plants and all kinds of buildings and structures and shit to do, you're gonna say, oh fuck, there's shit to do on this planet, that's not realistic, and get back in your ship and leave? That instantly destroys that bullshit argument, because the obvious answer is no. Of course they're not gonna get in their ship and leave. There's things to do there. And having things to do on the planet is not a negative. On the other hand, nobody's going to land on a planet, get out of their ship, look around and find that there's no life, no buildings, no structures or anything to do, and go, there's not shit to do on this planet. Hey, that's realistic. Good job, game. Nobody's doing that shit. Not having anything to do is a negative. So you can miss me with that bullshit argument. I hear people all the time say, oh, you want it to be like Star Wars where there's life on every planet? Yeah, I do. It's a fucking video game. What's the point of having 1,000 planets if fucking over 90% of them have nothing to do on them, have no life on them? What the fuck is the point, right? I'm not playing National Geographic's Space Simulator 2023. I'm playing Starfield, a Bethesda RPG video game. It is not a simulator. It is not simulating real life. It is not a simulation of space. As much as these motherfuckers want to pretend like it's a space simulation, it's not. It is not a space simulation. It's a video game. It is not a simulator of any type. It's a video game. Video games are intended to be fun. Landing on a planet to find nothing to do is not fun. I don't give a shit how scientifically accurate it is. You can take that argument and stick it up your ass. Another thing that's a big killer about this game is the load screens. You've probably heard people saying how it's nothing but load screens. And that is true. Because you're hopping from place to place to place to place, it is nothing but load screens. And even load screens in places where it shouldn't have load screens, like getting into your ship. Getting into your ship, there's a fucking load screen. You have to load to get into your ship. It makes no goddamn sense. And you'll even load buildings and then have to load interior portions of buildings. I don't understand why there are so many fucking load screens in this game, but there are. And it completely destroys all immersion. And you'll find yourself just skipping half the load screens by fast traveling. You will fast travel everywhere just to save time and not have to look at load screens. I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm going to give you the quote-unquote more immersive way of doing it, and then I'll give you the way you're honestly going to be doing it, okay? So let's say scenario is I'm inside of a building, I just got a mission from someone, and they want me to go to another planet and grab an item inside a building, okay? This is the most immersive version of this scenario. I leave that building, load screen as it loads me into the city, walk to my ship, get in my ship, load screen as I get into my ship. Hold Y to lift off, animation of my ship lifting off from the surface, and then load screen as it loads me going into space. Once I'm in space, I pull up my star map and select the planet I want to warp to, load screen as it warps me into space right outside the planet. Then open up my star map again to select where I want to land on the planet, load screen again, and then animation of my ship landing on the planet. Then I want to leave my ship. Load screen as I leave my ship and now are on the surface of the planet. I walk to the building, load screen as I get into the building, do whatever I do in the building, kill people, whatever, grab the item I need, and then do the entire process in reverse. It is load screen to 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 load screen, and that is the quote-unquote immersive way of doing this. How immersive was that? It wasn't immersive at all. It also is a fuck ton of load screens. Now, realistically, you're not going to do it that way. Because you may do it like that the first couple times, but after a while, you're going to say, fuck that, it takes too long. And this is how you're going to do every scenario after that. Guy gives you the mission while you're in the building, great. While you're still in the building, you're just going to hit start, open up your star map, and immediately select what planet you want to warp to from inside the building. You're then going to fast travel to space outside of that planet. Then the rest of the process is the same, because you still have to pick the spot to land on, you still have to fucking get out of your ship, you still have to walk to the building, etc., etc. But you skipped leaving the building and loading the city, loading getting into the ship, and then loading to get into space. You skipped all that. How immersive is that? That's even less immersive. But guess what? You're going to pick the less immersive option because it saves you time. Nobody's going to pick the more quote-unquote immersive version because it's still not immersive. You have the non-immersive version that takes more time, or the non-immersive version that takes less time. Both are not immersive. And there are some things this game really could have done that would have lended itself to feeling more immersive, right? Things like getting into your ship without there being a load screen, allowing you to fly your ship over the surface of the planet, allowing you to fly yourself up into space, through space, and then through the atmosphere down to a planet and land wherever you want, right? This really would have lended itself to helping make this game immersive. And in a world where games like No Man's Sky exist, and even games like Star Wars Outlaws is coming out, where you can do that, it really hurts that you can't in this game. And there's a multitude of reasons for why you might not be able to, right? I've heard all kinds of reasons, from just because there's way too many things going on, because having the object permanence, which is all the different objects you can pick up, because all those objects the game tracks, the object permanence being way too heavy on the CPU to also do flying over the atmosphere, whether it's because of limitations to the engine they're using, which is Creation Engine 2, whatever the reasons are, to me, I don't fucking care. Because there are games that exist, and there are games that other people are going to be able to play who don't really understand anything about gaming, who don't understand anything about game development. People are going to have played games like No Man's Sky, or are going to play games like Star Wars Outlaws, where you can just seamlessly get into a ship from the surface of a planet, fly over the surface of a planet, fly up into space, warp through space, and then down into the atmosphere of a planet, and then eventually onto the surface of a planet. Like, games like that do exist and are going to exist in the future. And the fact that Starfield is not one of them, I don't care what the reason is. I don't care what the excuse is. The fact that Starfield, this massive, immersive Bethesda RPG, is not one of those games is something that will forever sting. Because, man, oh man, how amazing it could have been if that was something you could do in this game. And to be fair, if we're being completely honest, if you just listen to the things that Bethesda said, you would kind of get the feeling that that was something you could do. Like, it was kind of implied that you could do these things. They really made it feel like you can just go anywhere or do anything. Like, here's a quote from Bethesda. You know, I think like a lot of gamers out there, we have dreamt of a game where we look to the skies and we can blast off inside space where you can explore with complete freedom in the galaxy. Complete freedom, you say, Bethesda? Well, if that's the case, we're still dreaming about that game, right? Like, if that's the game that we all dreamt about, and that's the game you guys dreamt about making, unfortunately, we're still dreaming about that game because that game, as of right now, does not exist. It's not quite the game that you guys have made. And it's for all of those reasons, especially when it comes to the exploration and the lack of immersion, that this game for me could never be Game of the Generation, is not Game of the Year, and is an 8 out of 10. This is a game that I feel that, you know, ambition is great, but I feel that ambition hurt this game, right? Because 1,000 planets was far too ambitious. I think if this was a game with 20 planets, it would have been a much better game. And I've heard people argue when I tell them that, saying, well, yeah, but then it would have been a much shorter game. Not necessarily. If you gave me 20 planets with fuck tons of shit to do, if you took all the content that you've spread over this 1,000 planets and just put it into 20 planets, then would it be the same amount of content? Would it not? Yes, it would. Except that instead of 1,000 planets with nothing to do, I would have 20 planets filled with shit to do. And for me, that is a better game. And then I've heard people argue that, well, if they did that, then it wouldn't have the same big galaxy feel that this game does. Well, I'd argue this game really doesn't feel like it has a big galaxy because there ain't shit to do. I'd also argue that if you play a game like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order or Star Wars Survivor, that you're bouncing from planet to planet, and there's only like a handful of planets, like what, 4 or 5 planets, but because there's shit to do on each one of those planets, and they're filled with all kinds of different life and caves and things to explore and animals to find, that you do feel like you're on this adventure that spans across the galaxy, going from planet to planet, exploring, even though it's only a small handful of planets, right? And those maps aren't huge maps, but they're dense with content. So if there were 20 planets in this game versus 1,000, and those 20 planets had all the content Bethesda created for the 1,000 condensed down into the 20, for me, that is a much better game. Also need to throw out there that you do find a lot of copy and paste buildings on some of these other planets. And not just copy and paste in terms of it's the same building, the same layout. I'm talking about copy and paste in terms of the same items in the same locations. They are completely copy and pasted because obviously there's 1,000 planets. They got to be filled with something. Artists couldn't put their hand on everything, so you have some that are just procedurally generated. So that means they just take the shit that's in the computer and populate, right? So you're going to find buildings on planets that are identical to buildings you've been to on other planets, not just in terms of the way that they look, but in terms of everything in every room, every book on every shelf. They are identical, the same. This again kills immersion, right? And again, you're going to have a lot of defenders of this game go, oh, but the scale and scope, oh no, this game is so large in the scale and scope, and the scale and scope, and the scope and scale, and the scale and scope. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't give a fuck about the scale and scope of the game. It's not a valid answer or comeback to the criticisms of this game's shortcomings. It's not. And now, is it fair to expect this game to have the graphics of Horizon Forbidden West, and the character models and animations of Horizon Forbidden West, and the space exploration of No Man's Sky and Star Wars Outlaws? Maybe not. But in a world where those games do exist and are going to exist, it's hard to play games like that and then not play this and see all of those shortcomings. And to just say, oh, the scale and scope as a comeback or reason for the shortcomings, it doesn't work here. It would work if this game had 1,000 planets brimming with life and shit to do and things to explore. But it doesn't. It has 1,000 planets empty and devoid of life. So for you to say, oh, well, of course it doesn't have good graphics, it has 1,000 planets. Well, of course it doesn't have good animations, it has 1,000 planets. Of course it doesn't have this or doesn't have that, it has 1,000 planets. Well, who the fuck decided to make it 1,000 planets? Bethesda did. Bethesda decided to make a game with 1,000 empty planets. And that's on Bethesda, right? That's Bethesda's fault. Bethesda chose to make a game with 1,000 empty planets. Not me, not you. So, I'm sorry. I think to talk about the shortcomings or the ways in which this game falls short of other games, those are valid criticisms. And just, oh, the scale and scope, that's not a good comeback, that's not a good answer, because the scale and scope of this game is irrelevant since those planets are empty. Before we end this video, though, I want to end on a positive note, because there is one other thing that Starfield does that I think is wonderful. This game handles New Game Plus in a way that I've never experienced before. It is actually quite interesting and probably the best implementation of a New Game Plus I've ever seen. It is super cool the way that they've done and has me eager to go into a second playthrough. Not just because I had fun with the game, just because I'm curious to see how it changes other things, because it definitely does change things as you go into New Game Plus. I can't explain to you how without spoiling a lot of shit, but just know that this New Game Plus and the way it handles New Game Plus, to me, is completely unique. I've never experienced this type of New Game Plus anywhere else. I mean, if it has happened someplace else, is it possible? Yeah, I just never experienced it. If someone has, let me know down in the comments, but shit, I've never experienced a game with a New Game Plus quite like this, and, you know, thumbs up and props to Bethesda for being creative enough to come up with a New Game Plus like this that makes you want to go through a second playthrough again, if not just for how much fun you had in the first playthrough, just to see what happens, or just to see what else has changed, because quite a lot changes as you start your second playthrough. But anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts and feelings about Starfield. I think it's a great game. Like I said, an 8 out of 10 for me. Game of the Year nominee? Sure. Game of the Year wonder? I don't think so. Not for me. Just like Kylo Ren at the beginning, just saying more, and not being able to stop not being Game of the Year. Just having more planets is not enough to counteract all the shortcomings this game has, which for me was quite a lot, especially in big areas that had a large impact on the immersion of this game. So for me, not Game of the Year. Nominee? Sure. Winner? No. Am I saying that it won't win Game of the Year? Absolutely not. That could very well happen. It's just not my Game of the Year. And that's all I got for you guys on this one. And that's the video, guys. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Have you had a chance to play Starfield? What do you think? And as always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next Supernova.